All right, Howard Stern interviewed Joe Biden. This was very, very interesting. Howard Stern has interviewed Hillary Clinton long after she lost the 2016 election. Howard Stern used to interview Donald Trump regularly before he was ever president. The first interview Howard Stern has ever done with a sitting president. Now, there are all sorts of praises and criticisms of this interview that we're going to look at. The praises have mostly been that in a longer than hour interview, which Joe Biden rarely does, he was empathetic. He was thoughtful. Yes, he stuttered sometimes. He has a stutter, but it was abundantly clear that his memory is fine, that he knows what day it is, that he knows where he is, and that this is not a guy with whom we'd be concerned being at the helm of the United States of America. As far as some of the criticisms, many criticisms that it was a softball interview, criticisms that the questions sounded prearranged to some degree. Now, one thing it's really important to understand, White Houses want restrictions. Publicists and handlers justify their existence by attempting to impose restrictions. We have dealt with this at a smaller level many times before. People come to us, they say, hey, we want the questions ahead of time. We say no. People come to us, they say, hey, listen, we'd really like you to ask about A, B, or C. And sometimes we'll say A and B are interesting, C is not. Or people will come and say, do not ask about X, and we'll make a call. If there is some controversy that is not central to our interview and we are asked to avoid it because of ongoing litigation, we might say, yeah, that's not going to be a topic on the show. If it's sort of an impossibility because this is really the full scope of the conversation about someone and we're being told, don't mention this, then we say we really can't do the interview in that case. So my point here is, especially at this level, I can only assume the White House and the likely dozens of people that were involved in setting up this interview had all sorts of requests. And when we get to an example question in a moment, I will point out this is not a question that Howard would ask unless it was part of, we want you to talk about this sort of discussion. That's my instinct. So let's start with the beginning. And it is a discussion of the seemingly disdain that Trump has for members of the military, suckers and losers, and Joe Biden, who happens to have a very different perspective, especially as his late son, Beau, served in the military.
He's promised if he doesn't win, there's going to be a bloodbath.
Can you
things
imagine?
like that. Here's what bothers me most. We have a fundamentally different value set. For example, when he was in Paris, he wouldn't go to that gravesite and said they're losers, these men and women who were killed in battle defending America. Losers, and I'm glad I wasn't there because I think I would have. My son's in one of those graves, in one of the graves back here, not there. And the idea that they're losers and suckers.
And McCain's a loser. He said McCain's a loser.
Well, McCain's a loser.
Can you imagine?
When John McCain got out of prison and was released, he came work for me. He was on the Senate liaison officer. We traveled over 100,000 miles together. And he was like an assistant because he worked for
It's a fabulous man. I got to meet him before he died.
No, he was a straight up guy, man. And
yeah.
Tough as hell. And, but I find I can't fathom a president of the United States of America saying that the folks who died defending this country were suckers and losers.
The topic of January 6th, of course, came up. And the discussion of, wait, now the rioters are patriots is what we're talking about? And the topic of the real change of the Republican Party over the last however many years was a topic of discussion. Take a listen.
What are we debating? A man picked up the phone and wanted to say, fake the election, give me 11,000 votes. I don't know how any American who loves this country, that's the end of the debate. You don't get to run if you're going to fix an election.
On January 6th, when they were storming the Capitol.
And a police officer died.
Yeah, and he would say nothing. He was sitting in that office that dining area off the Oval Office for 3 hours and said nothing. I was supposed to make a speech on the economy that day. Instead, I made a speech I was in Delaware on that issue because I was elected president, but I wasn't sworn in yet. It was derelict. It was almost criminal. Did nothing. He just sat there and watched what was happening. Not a single, and now he wants to he calls them patriots and victims, and says he's going to pardon them all if he's reelected.
How do some of the guys that you served in the Senate with, I'm talking about Republicans, how are they going along with this?
Well, I don't think, look, this is not your father's Republican Party.
That is for damn sure. It is not Mitt Romney's Republican Party. It's not John McCain's Republican Party. And you could go further from there. So I thought that this was a very interesting interview overall. Now, I'll be with you in saying this was not a difficult interview from the standpoint of the questions. And the degree to which that is because Howard recognizes the critical moment where we now find ourselves 6 months before an election that is as impactful and significant as any I can remember. There is no question that there are issues where Howard Stern disagrees with Biden, and they could have been the source of the interview exclusively. And there is no question that Howard Stern has also made it clear, we've got to wake up to this danger that is Trump. This guy could win, and it is really important that we make sure that the competing visions are sort of enumerated and the picture is painted in big, bold relief of what is at stake here. And if you want to see an example of the sort of thing that was probably suggested by the White House, here's what we want you to ask Joe Biden about. Here's an example. The new requirements on airlines for canceled flights. This is not an unimportant issue. I struggle to believe that, having listened to Howard for decades, this is an example of a question Howard would be eager to ask if it weren't part of the terms of doing the interview.
Yesterday, you did something so great, and I don't know how many people are aware of it, but you got this thing with the airline passed that now when an airline, for some reason, screws you up and doesn't let you, whether you can't make the flight, they used to give you a credit, but now they are forced to refund you. And I think that's a huge deal.
Well, there's a lot of those, Howard. The fact is that when you're raised and you come up in a middle-class family, all this stuff matters to you. It matters to those little items that they say, well, it only costs this, only costs that.
Yeah.
It matters. And so there's a lot of junk fees, too. For example, banks can't charge you $35 for overdrafts anymore.
All right. I think you get it. So listen, my critique of the interview, if there is one, is that some of this stuff is not the most interesting stuff. Not that the automatic refunds on canceled flights aren't important. They absolutely are important. But having listened to Howard for decades, it doesn't strike me as the sort of question Howard would choose to include in a 75-minute interview with the sitting president of the United States, unless it's part of the terms that were agreed to. I think this was absolutely smart for the White House to do. It is only upside. Lots of Howard's audience, from what I saw online, doesn't like Biden. Most of them still don't like Biden, but some said, hey, you know what? He clearly isn't demented. He clearly knows what's going on. And maybe it is a better vision than what Trump presents. So I think it was smart for the White House to do it. If you're looking for the perfect gift to celebrate the moms in your life, an Aura frame is a beautiful Wi-Fi connected digital picture frame that lets you share and display unlimited photos. I just got one for my mom. Super easy to upload and share photos via the Aura app. If you're giving an Aura as a gift, you can personalize the frame with preloaded photos and memories. I did this for my mom. I actually have now given both of my parents these as a gift, loaded it with pictures of the baby, which they loved. And now either I or my parents can add or remove photos from the frame with the app. From grandmothers to new moms, aunts, even friends in your life, everybody loves an Aura frame. It is the best digital photo frame, according to Wirecutter. It was one of Oprah's favorite things. Aura frames are guaranteed to bring joy to moms of all ages. And right now, Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day. Go to auraframes.com/Pacman and use code Pacman to get $30 off and free shipping on their best-selling frame. The link is in the description. Terms and conditions apply.